Hello world, and welcome to the Genesis Bible study. Today is the last lesson, and it's the big one. We're going to talk about the flood, and there's a lot to get through today, so I'll try and do it quickly. Do not forget, if you have questions about this lesson or any of the others, you can leave them in the comments. I will try and make a Q&A video later on in some form to address those, or I'll just address them in the comments. The flood. It says in Genesis 6 verses 1 to 4, when man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw the daughters of men were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh, his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. And the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. Now the question is, who are the sons of God? Because this is where this starts, is with them. Now there are different theories. The main theory that people always followed was that these were fallen angels. They were the ones who sinned with Satan. It's because the Hebrew term there for sons of God is Beno Elohim, which is always used for created beings. It is used for angels and then for Adam. So it is a created spiritual being. And that's also what we read in the book of Enoch, which I mentioned last time is not scripture, but is an interesting book anyway. Another theory, though, is people say it was the godly offspring of Seth. I think those are more for those who follow the theory that Cain went out and had a wife from a sort of a half human, half ape type creature, and that there was not supposed to be mixing, but Seth's children went and did it anyway. For that you have to have the evolutionary view, which I don't. Another one is said that the rulers of the period were mixing with the commoners. I do not think that's likely to be the problem, because that's human with human and wouldn't be a problem. Why would there be Nephilim? And another one is that it was demon-possessed people. At least the demons were possessing men so they could have intercourse with a woman. Could be, but it doesn't explain the Nephilim. I do favor the fallen angels theory, based purely because I do believe you should read the Bible as it is and not try to interpret it. And then you do find that Bena Elohim are always created beings. Right. Goes further than to say that the Lord saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Some interesting thoughts here as we read this. Firstly, it says the Lord regretted that he made man. Some translations say that it repented the Lord that he made man. Sort of like God was like, oh, rats, that was not a good idea. But we say God's omniscient, knows everything. I think this is more a way of showing God has a personality and is a personal being. And also more a way for us to understand the idea of what's going on. But God knew what was going to happen in the first place. And it shows God's love actually for us, that while we would sin, that he would still create us and give us a chance to make the right choice. This also shows, though, that God has the right to judge his creation. He rules, he can judge, he can make the rules. So that's also important to take note of. But what's always amazing is there's always a remnant. It says Noah had favor or grace with God. And that's something to remember, is no matter how bad things look like they're going, there's always a remnant. It's the same thing God said to Elijah when he was depressed and said, I'm the only one who serves the Lord. That he said, no, I've got others. Right, here's a thought. Atlantis. And the reason I wanted to have this thought of this amazing city with a strange story is simply because of the following. You see, before the flood, we do not know what they called that civilization. We do not know what their cities were named. We don't even know how developed they were. And it comes to the thing is, can the stories of Atlantis just be a twisted version of what life was like before the flood? Noah and his sons would have told the new people as they were on earth afterwards, and could that just be where it came from? Interesting. The Atlantis story is, though, of this huge city and great civilization, which was highly advanced and destroyed by water, a flood or tsunami. and is now lost forever. And that would really fit on a high level the idea of the world before the flood. But that is just a flood myth. There are many other flood myths, and whenever you look at all these flood myths, they all have, while they don't always agree with each other, they have lots of elements which can all be found in the Bible. And on this chart, the Syrio-Babylonia one is just the name they gave to the biblical account. And you can see that the rest have got overlaps. It's amazing how many of these theories there are over the whole world, as if the whole world knows that there was once a flood. And it's always amazing how many of them have a family who's being saved, or humans being saved, and doing it by boat, and it's quite remarkable. It almost makes you think there's a common memory through humanity of what had happened. As we read further, we get the dimensions of the ark and what's going to happen to this with this boat. The important bit for us is verse 15. It says, "This is how you're to make it. The length of the ark, 300 cubits, its breadth 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. What is a cubit? Well, a cubit is simply the measurement of your finger to your elbow. So how big is a cubit then? According to Google, it's 45.72 centimeters. My cubit is 46 centimeters. My wife's cubit is 43 centimeters. The short cubit officially was 45. The long cubit was 52. The royal cubit between 51 and 55 somewhere. And the longest cubit ever measured is 60.9 centimeters. Many people think Noah probably used the royal cubit, but I decided to be a bit mean and said Noah had to use the short cubit. Short cubit means the ark would have been 135 meters long. It would have been 22.5 meters wide, 13.5 meters high, and 3 stories. That is still a huge boat. Was this Noah's ark? Not on your life. This is probably the best representation of what Noah's ark looked like. Or possibly this. Remember, this was a barge meant to just survive a flood. If we compare Noah's ark, though, to boats, we will see that this is roughly the largest wooden vessel you can build that will still be stable on water. The Titanic and Queen Mary II and other steel ships are bigger, but remember, they're built from different materials and for different purposes. The ark is perfectly designed to just survive rough waters, and is the biggest you can build a wooden vessel. So how did all the animals fit on the ark? That's a big question people ask. It does say, though, that of all the birds according to their kinds, of all the animals according to the kinds, of every creeping thing according to its kinds, 2 of every sort of thing shall be kept alive. So how did he fit them on? Well, firstly, you didn't have to take all the species. 2 poodles, 2 chihuahuas, 2 Great Danes, 2 wolves. Nope. Created kinds. 2 dogs is all he needed. So, how many created kinds are there? Well, there's about 16,000, roughly, give or take. These estimates will vary a lot, but give you an idea where we're sitting. What was going in the ark were the land animals and the birds. That would give you about 2,500. Insects and fish aren't necessarily needed to go. Fish, well, they'll survive a flood well. And one of the interesting things when you look at flood-ridden places, the first creatures usually back in on land are the insects, because they can survive in burrows and hide out and on debris and logs and all sorts of things that they survive on. They'll also survive a flood quite well. Dinosaurs, well, we looked earlier and we said that dinosaurs and man have lived together. So, yes, the dinosaurs would probably be on the ark as well. Roughly 50 kinds, give or take. And we worked out that the space on the ark is about 9,000 meters squared. The average size of an animal, including with the dinosaurs taken, would be that of a sheep. So if you give each animal a meter squared, it means you need 5,000 meters squared of place to keep animals. That leaves a little under the half of what the ark was for people, for food, for whatever you need to take with you. And it all fits on that boat. And remember, I took the small cubit for this calculation. Larger cubit, it would have had a bit more room. Okay, in Genesis 7, it says that on the day that the flood started, the fountains of the deep burst forth, and the windows of heaven were opened, and the rain fell on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. How was the flood caused is a very big question people ask. One theory that people do follow, those who follow at least the canopy theory, is that the canopy, the water or ice around the earth, burst and fell down, causing the flood. If you don't follow the canopy theory, you need to think about something else. One of the theories that is out there was that there was water under the crust of the earth, and that through plate tectonics, what they call catastrophic plate tectonics, the flood was caused by breaking out all the water under the surface. Now, what is plate tectonics? That's simply just every continent is, as it were, on a plate that's moving around on the earth, and it moves very slowly, but under the right circumstances, it'd be asteroid meteor strikes, flares from the sun, whatever, you can cause an agitation in these, and you could speed them up. Models have been shown to this that it could happen. So there's a theory that that the catastrophic plate tectonics is what happened. Now, when we do look at the Earth, we do see that the Earth is pretty ravaged under the water. There are these huge cracks, almost as if the Earth's crust was torn open rapidly, fast, and hard, which would fit the catastrophic plate tectonics theory, and would also leave the scarring we do see on the planet. Is this the way it happened? I don't know. Theory sounds interesting. Definitely worth exploring more. There are people looking into this. Okay, as we read further, we also read that on that very same day, Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, Japheth, and Noah's wife, and the 3 wives of the sons, with them entered the ark. They and every beast according to its kind, and all livestock according to its kind, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth according to its kind, and every bird according to its kind, every winged creature, they went into the ark with Noah, 2 and 2 of all flesh, which has the breath of life. And those that entered, male and female of all flesh, went in as God commanded them, and the Lord shut him in. It's interesting, it says that God shut the ark, so he closed the door. And something interesting is also in John 10, Jesus says, I am the door. If anyone enters me, he will be saved and go in and out and find pasture. And it's interesting to see that God saved Noah in a time of judgment by them going through the door. And Jesus is the door, and we have to go through that door if we want to be saved in the judgment at the end of the world. And it, to me, this again is a type of Jesus. The ark is a type of Jesus, you know, that if we go through that door, through Jesus, we too can be saved. As we read further, it says, the waters prevailed so mightily on the earth that all the high mountains under the whole heavens were covered. Now, there's something about this that's interesting. There are people who want to discuss whether or not this was a worldwide flood, or was it just a local flood in Noah's area. If it was a local flood and every high mountain was covered, what on earth does that look like? Because remember, the high mountains are covered. It means wherever this water goes, it's going to cover mountains further and have to spread further to a point where either that doesn't cover the mountains, or else it's got to cover the whole world. The way I see it, you cannot read Genesis and not say it's a worldwide flood. Is the proof of a flood? Well, we know Mount St Helens. It's a volcano that exploded about 40 years ago now, I believe. And it left a lot of ash in layers, which formed these rock layers. And through the resulting mud and water that flowed afterwards, cut these canyons in a matter of time. It took weeks to cut these canyons. So when we see other canyons like this, we know that they don't take millions of years to form. They can form very fast. This is a proof of a flood. Do we have others? Well, bent rocks. While this was still soft, it had to have been bent and moved. This would be fit the catastrophic plate tectonics theory very well. And also a global flood. Genesis 8. God said to Noah, go out from the ark, you and your wife, and your sons and your sons' wives with you. Bring out with you every living thing that is with you, and all flesh, birds and animals, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, that they may swarm on the earth, and be fruitful and multiply on the earth. So Noah went out, and his sons and his wife, and his sons' wives with him. Every beast, every creeping thing, every bird, everything that moves on the earth went out by families from the ark. You see, the interesting thing is, people want to say, where do all the variations come from? And the variations within kinds isn't proof of evolution, because what we do see is dogs generally just produce dogs. There's nothing unique about this. It's just the way it is. This is nature. This is not evolution. It's just the way it is. And you can, from two dogs, you can generate all kinds of dogs. Big dogs, little dogs, hairy dogs, fluffy dogs, ugly dogs. Same thing with cows. Cows produce cows. Cows in grasslands, cows in dry areas, cows on the moon. Cows are cows. Same thing with cats. Cats produce cats. Most cats just sleep all day, but they're still cats. And horses. Horses produce horses, which produce horses and horses. And this is just normal biology. This is not evolution. And this is something we do expect because these are created kinds. Now, in order for evolution to be true, you need mutations. And problem is mutations come in three kinds. You get negative mutations, neutral mutations, positive mutations. Negative mutations will always cause sickness or death. This is not good for evolution because you lose information and creatures die off. Neutral information is no change. And evolution literally means change, so there's no evolution. What they need is positive information, mutations, something that adds information, and then whatever that was, it needs to reproduce to survive. Otherwise, it'll die out anyway. Now, the thing about mutations you've got to know is, as we said, evolution needs mutations otherwise, that have an addition of information for one thing to become a new thing. Problem is there is no such an example of a positive mutation anywhere. No one can name one. There is no addition of information. And that makes sense because in the law of information, Dr. Werner Gitt points out that to create information, you need a greater source of information. You see, I'm giving you a presentation based on information I have, a larger source of information. That information I built up by studying from looking at other places where there was a larger source of information. You see, there's always going to be a greater source from which you get your information from. If you apply this infinitely, means you're going to come to an infinite source of information. That is God. Genesis 2 says, the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every bird of the heavens, upon everything that creeps on the ground, and all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they are delivered. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. As I give you the green plants, I give you everything. You see, this is a change of diet. Originally, we were meant to eat only green plants. But now, every moving thing shall be food for you. Because something happened at the flood. Something which meant that plants would no longer grow and be able to provide the nutrition needed. Now, there are people who live fine on vegetarian diets or vegan diets. That's fine. But there is nothing wrong with eating meat, because the world no longer supplies enough nutrients via the plants. Then it goes further to say that God said to Noah and to his sons, behold, I establish my covenant with you and your offspring after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the livestock, and every beast of the earth with you, as many as came out of the ark. It is for every beast of the earth. I establish my covenant with you, that never again shall all flesh be cut off by waters of the flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is the sign of the covenant that I make between me and you, and every living creature that is with you, for all future generations. I have set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign of a covenant between me and the earth. For those who want to say it's a local flood, we have lots of local floods. Is God breaking his promise? There's never been a worldwide flood again, and that is God's promise. He wouldn't do that. And that's something I want to leave you with, is God's promise. Whenever we see a rainbow, we should take the rainbow back as Christians. It is a sign of God's promise to not judge the world by water, but also should be a remembrance that God will one day judge it by fire, and that we have to stand right before him and live for him and proclaim his message to others. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this and learned a lot from it. Do leave questions and comments if there are any. Like and subscribe. Keep well, and God bless.